Hey everybody. So this is obviously not where I normally shoot my videos. I'm actually on a trip with my guy, and you might actually hear there's a band playing at this in the area that we're at. So anyway, but I wanted to talk. So I'm in this truck, and I just had this idea about something that I've been wanting to talk about for a bit, which is the effect that I think that this situation that Marilyn Manson has found himself in, the effect that it's going to have on his legacy as an artist, as a human being. And I think that there is, look, I understand that with the documentary, the HBO documentary that came out recently, and the press tour, the relentless press tour that Evan Rachel Wood has been doing, the Drew Barrymore show alone was just beyond the pale. It was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. If you haven't seen it, if you've not seen the way that Drew Barrymore just gushes over Evan Rachel Wood, she calls her like her new hero. Like she's like almost crying. She's almost at a loss for words. I actually have rarely seen someone suck up to someone else publicly like that before, or privately, or anywhere that didn't involve actual genitalia. So yeah, so that was pretty disgusting. And of course, Evan Rachel Wood, she was very very, what's the word, magnanimous. Oh, thank you. Oh. I know it's all sickening for those of us who believe that Marilyn Manson is innocent and that he's been framed by these people, a lot of opportunistic and unscrupulous people looking for media attention, looking to, in Evan Rachel Wood's case, promote them, and Ilma Gore's case, promote themselves as activists and get an HBO documentary and all that. I know it's really disheartening. Fortunately, Manson had, he had his lawyers filed that lawsuit. It's a very strong lawsuit. I've talked about it before on my show. Go check out the videos, and I'll be talking about it again. And that lawsuit, that's a real thing. That's a real force now. I was talking about this with eHacker earlier. We were talking about the idea that women, and not just women, right? That people like Amber Heard, and like Evan Rachel Wood and others, they seem to feel initially in these scams, and for a long time in these scams, that they can just write their own reality. And that may work for a while, especially when one gets the jump on someone else, when the other person, as in Johnny Depp's case and Marilyn Manson's case, they've not had time to really see this coming or to really prepare. I know Evan Rachel Wood is kind of, hinting around that it was Manson, but both Depp and Manson got blindsided more or less by these accusations, by these women. And so I think for a long time, Amber Heard really, as a lot of delusional, narcissistic, sociopathic types feel, I think that she felt like she could continue to write her own reality. I mean, it has to have been very emboldening for Amber Heard that she won that that Johnny Depp lost that UK trial. And that Amber Heard was not forced to quit Aquaman and all of that, right? But reality is finally about to set in. Rest assured, I think. I know that it's not a done deal or whatever, and it's going to be a tense time for a lot of Johnny Depp supporters, this trial that's coming up, but I think he's going to win. And Amber Heard, it's finally gotten to the point where this story has reached kind of a critical mass, and the media, even if Amber doesn't lose in this trial, if Johnny Depp doesn't win, I think the media is finally going to pick up this story after several weeks of this trial being televised and everyone learning, having it forced in their face, what Amber Heard did, and what Johnny went through. She's finished. So she's finally. It's taken years. I mean, look. Let's think about when Amber Heard started this scam. It was 2016, right? It's taken years. For this moment to arrive, but sooner or later, it's kind of like that cheesy saying, but it's a great one. Martin Luther King: the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. It's actually not a cheesy saying. It's been sort of overused, right? So it seems a little platitudinous now, but I think that that's true in a lot of cases. And I think that in Amber Heard's case, that arc has taken a while, but she's about to meet with reality. And I think the same is going to be true. Look, that lawsuit that Marilyn Manson filed against Ilma Gore and Evan Rachel Wood, and the lawsuits that he's involved in with the other women that are going to take place in courts of law. Like these are real situations. This isn't just some BS, HBO documentary where you can do whatever you want to, basically, and few people are going to challenge you on it, and no one in the media. It's not like that, this court thing, these court situations, these court cases, they're going to be real. And look, if you look at that Marilyn Manson lawsuit, as a lot of us have, let's forget about the Drew Barrymore BS and the Trevor Noah appearances and all of that. But let's get down to the reality. And the reality is that lawsuit has some serious charges in it and serious evidence. And I do think that Evan Rachel Wood and Ilma Gore are probably in deep legal shit. Even apart from this lawsuit. I'm talking about with the criminal justice system. And I've been saying this, but I do believe, and I have no special insight, believe me, into what's going on with the police or the prosecutors or anything. I have no sources over there. But I do think that, I think someone's going to get arrested. But if not, someone is going to be basically more or less metaphorically eviscerated through this legal system. I really think that, and I think that these other women, Esme Bianco, Ashley Walters, Jane Doe / Chloe Black, and who's the other one? The one who's just totally fucking ridiculous. Oh yeah, Ashley Morgan Smith line. I do think that they're gonna find that their lawsuits are kind of like when the U.S. when we went into Vietnam. And when we first went in, we felt really confident and everything, and then we got bogged down in this quagmire. Well, or you can think about, I don't know what's going on with the Russia-Ukraine situation, because I have to be honest with you, I've not been following it like I should. But you hear these stories about how Russia's getting bogged down in Ukraine now. I don't know. But anyway, my point is, these women, they filed these lawsuits. They're cocky about it, right? But they're going to get bogged down in their own quagmires, and they may really come to regret the day that they filed these lawsuits, because these lawsuits now are giving a very structured and methodical forum to Marilyn Manson. And structured and methodical is what we supporters need, and what Manson needs in order to bring the truth out, okay? The media, they're not structured, they're not methodical anymore. Maybe once upon a time journalism was, but for the most part, we know what it is now, right? It's ridiculous. It's political. It's too heavily politicized. It's too sensationalized. It's entertainment mixed with a kind of like very sort of banal politics, right? So anyway, my point is, these lawsuits are real, but I know that there's a deeper concern here about, like, what does this mean, in a deeper sense for artists like Johnny Depp and for Marilyn Manson. And I want to speak specifically to the Marilyn Manson situation right now, because I want Manson supporters to take heart from something I'm going to say. And I've said this on Instagram before, I'm going to say it, but I'll say it here, and I really, really mean it, okay? I really think that in the end, what Marilyn Manson is going through is going to be a great thing for his legacy as an artist. I really believe that. And, we could debate whether or not that makes it worth it, that he's been going through this hell, and I'm sure he has opinions on that. But I just really do believe that this is actually what he's going through right now is going to enhance and give sort of a renewed relevance to his later stage career and him as an artist in his 50s and beyond, as opposed to when he first, was on the scene in his 20s, and then, even into his 30s and 40s. Because look, what this is going to do is this is going to basically give him a similar legacy as a persecuted artist, as a misunderstood artist, as a persecuted artist who suffered due to the prejudices of his particular time. It's very similar to, and I've talked about this before, to Oscar Wilde. And Oscar Wilde, the great Irish playwright and novelist, and et cetera, the great writer. His legacy was only enhanced by what he went through, and I'm sure a number of people know. But we're talking Victorian England, and Oscar Wilde was gay, and what happened was, and see if you can see the parallels here to Manson's situation. Oscar Wilde's art was considered very controversial. If you ever read the novel, the Portrait of Dorian Gray, It is about a man who basically kind of falls in love with himself and with the dark side, so to speak, and really gives himself over to, a kind of what a number of people say is a kind of like debauchery and a kind of very sort of narcissistic and in the end kind of an evil lifestyle. Now, I'm not here to analyze the book, but I'm just telling you sort of the broad strokes. Well, you have to understand that this work of art and other literary works by Oscar Wilde at the time, they were actually considered controversial. And he, like Manson, was considered to be a controversial artist. He was considered to be a provocateur. And so he had that already against him in the public mind. I mean, he was very loved and revered by a number of fans and a number of those who appreciated his literature, and he was very loved in the upper class, some of the upper class social circles, because he was so witty. He was so interesting at parties and stuff. But his art was controversial, and that would end up hurting him when he would get into some legal trouble later. Now, listen to this. What happened to Oscar Wilde is that he fell in love with a very, very narcissistic and childish younger man named Bosie, Lord Bosie Douglas. And Bosie was very beautiful blonde hair, very sort of delicate features, had a sort of an almost sort of like feminine grace about him, but he was very spoiled. He was very narcissistic. Probably we would say had narcissistic personality disorder. Although I'm not an expert on this guy, and so if you're a scholar of this guy, don't get on to me, right? But I'm just saying. And the thing is Oscar Wilde, who was older than him. Oscar Wilde fell head over heels in love with this enchanting, younger, narcissistic, beautiful, blonde-haired lover of his. And it was a consensual relationship and everything. And so, because of that, Oscar Wilde made some unwise decisions. And what happened was Bosie had a difficult relationship with his own father, who did not approve of his son's what was referred to back then as a kind of a sodomite lifestyle, what we would call homosexual or gay or whatever, right? Back then they referred to as sodomy, Sodom and Gomorrah. And so what happened was his dad did not approve. Bosie's dad, the younger lover, his dad did not approve of his association with Wilde or a lot of other things. And really, Bosie just had this very difficult, tempestuous relationship with his father in a number of respects. Well, what happened is, because Wilde was so in love with Bosie, and because Bosie was always complaining about his dad, Wilde would at times get into these unfortunate situations, or this kind of a feud almost with the father. So what happened is, one day, the father, and we're talking about, upper class people, right? So the father was going to, was I believe, tell me if I get the story wrong, it could be a little off, but the father, Bosie's dad, was looking for Bosie. And he went to this club where the upper class men would frequent, I believe. He went to this club and he was looking for Bosie, or no, I know what it was. Maybe he wanted to have words with Oscar Wilde. I should have researched this again before I'm doing it all from memory. Maybe he wanted to have words with Oscar Wilde, the dad did, because he was maybe pissed off about what he saw as Wilde's influence on his son. At any rate, the point is, the dad left a kind of a card, a sort of a calling card at this club to let Wilde know that he was looking for him, and he made reference on this card, that people would see, that other people would see, right, to the sodomite Oscar Wilde. And so basically what he was insulting Oscar Wilde, basically for being gay. Now, here's where Oscar Wilde miscalculated. Oscar Wilde, because he loved Bosie so much and he had been drawn into this feud and these difficulties that Bosie was having with his dad, Oscar Wilde, when he found out about this, he really overreacted. And so Oscar Wilde sued Bosie's father for libel, for slander, for defamation. He sued him basically for calling him gay publicly, right? The equivalent of that. And unfortunately for Wilde, Bosie's dad, he hadn't used a very nice term, but unfortunately for Wilde, it was an accurate expression at the time of the fact that Wilde, was gay. And so he basically Wilde allowed himself to be drawn into this feud with Bosie's dad and sort of got into this fight that the dad had sort of provoked, took it to the legal level, and he lost the libel case. He lost the defamation case, Wilde did, against the father. And now here is where Wilde would now be punished for his art, his artistic unconventionality and edginess, his image, and also his lifestyle. Because what happened is, when he lost that trial, then the English authorities were like, oh, this guy's lost this trial because he is a, quote, sodomite, all right, or he is a homosexual. And guess what? Back then in Victorian England, sodomy, the act of sodomy, the act of, we think of as homosexual sex, right? It was considered to be a crime. It was not, this was a law that was not often enforced, or not always enforced, but it was technically a crime to engage in, for men to engage in sexual activity, right? And so the authorities then arrested Oscar Wilde, and they brought him up on charges of sodomy, basically charges of being a gay man. And what's interesting is that a significant portion of the trial was devoted to Oscar Wilde's art. To actually, it was actually his art was put on trial in a lot of ways, and he was cross-examined about it, and especially the more controversial things that he had written, more controversial topics and so forth in his writings. And it was felt that his image and that his unconventional art and his edginess and his refusal to and his lifestyle and his sexual orientation and his refusal to accept societal norms and societal restrictions and conventional thinking, that these things convicted him. All of these things together convicted him, and he was convicted, and he spent a long time in a labor camp. And so he was sent to prison, and he was forced to participate in forced labor, basically. And we're not talking about the kind that, Evan Rachel Wood thinks that she was forced to participate in on the set of Heart-Shaped Glasses, okay? It was consensual. You weren't wasted, okay? And you didn't have sex, Evan Rachel Wood. Anyway, so, you might say, well, that's a sad story. Okay, and so, yeah, what happened to Oscar Wilde? It was very sad. So he basically, this labor camp that he was sent to, this prison that he went to where he had to do hard labor, it basically, in a lot of ways, broke him. I mean, the whole process, the trial, the prison, the labor, all of that broke him. And when he came out, in a lot of ways, he was a broken man, although he also felt that he had gained a lot of spiritual insight. And in fact, if you look at the interesting and really touching work of writing that Oscar Wilde wrote when he was in prison, I believe it was a letter that he wrote to his former lover, Bosie Douglas. It's called De Profundis. And one of the things that he talks about in De Profundis is the fact that he realizes that for too long he had only wanted to focus on the beauty of life and not the ugliness, and that now, through this process, through going through this very difficult, soul-wrenching, agonizing process, he had come to see the value in looking and experiencing suffering in life because of the spiritual deepening that one experiences when one goes through those things. So that's an interesting observation. But in many ways, he was very broken. And so you might say, well, that's a really depressing story. Thanks, Kristen. No, but listen to me. This became a huge part of his legacy because it really just added to the idea that this was a man who was in many ways ahead of his time, or outside the constraints and the narrow vision of his society. This was a man who refused in many ways to change based on what society wanted, refused to conform, right? And this was a man whose art was so ahead of its time, was so edgy, or was so interesting, or was so powerful that it could actually contribute to him being maligned in society and persecuted by the legal system, and even persecuted in court, right? That his art was so interesting, it was so edgy, it was so powerful. And so consequently today, Oscar Wilde is considered to be this great artist, not only, yes, primarily because of the actual art that he created, but also because of his persecution as an artist who was outside the narrow constraints of society, and as someone whose art challenged the society that day and was misunderstood by the society that day, and as someone who suffered due to the particular prejudices of his society. Now I'm thinking about Marilyn Manson, and I'm thinking about if this had never happened, if he had never had this, if these women had never come out with this BS hoax, and he weren't having to go through what he's going through right now, if he had just continued the rest of his life, what would have happened? Well, I mean, no disrespect at all to Manson fans. I mean, no disrespect at all to Marilyn Manson. You know, I think that I'm sure that his work continues to be just as great as it ever was. I'm not familiar with a lot of his work because I didn't start out as a Manson fan, and so I haven't acquainted myself with a lot of Manson's songs even now. But I did listen to We Are Chaos the other day, and that song actually made me cry. That was a beautiful song, beautiful, and just really a great work of art. So if that's the kind of stuff that Marilyn Manson was producing, even up until recently, you know, like what he did that came out like right before the allegations surfaced, right? So if that's the kind of art that he's producing, he's not lost anything. I think in some ways he's progressed, right? I think that's a really great song. So I want to listen to more. But what I'm trying to say though is, in terms of the way that the media would perceive Marilyn Manson's artistic career, he would be seen as one of these artists who were past their most interesting time, whether that's true or not. And like I said, I listened to We Are Chaos, that song, and I was like, whoa. But it would have been what happens to most musicians, you know, is they continue to have a lot of fun and be successful and all of that, but their arc is seen as in a kind of a gradual decline. And I guess what I'm saying is, if this stuff hadn't happened to Manson, I don't think that, you know, he'd be in the news or in the public mind or anything really at all for the rest of his life. It would be a kind of obscurity. Now, it's an obscurity where he's still touring and making music and all of that, right? I'm not knocking it, but I'm just saying in terms of a legacy. But now what's happened is that, as painful as this is, I hate to use the term made him relevant again because it just sounds so gross, but this has really made him relevant. And you might say, yeah, relevant as an accused rapist, but I'm telling you, I believe he is going to be vindicated in a powerful way. I believe that. I would bet big money on it, okay? And it's not just from some kind of gut feeling, although that is what has been guiding me just as much as my intellect in this whole thing from the very beginning. I have to tell y'all, again, I got into the YouTube thing to make videos about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, and I was not planning on covering anything else at the outset, at least. And when this Marilyn Manson thing happened, I had a number of people telling me, don't cover this, it's going to ruin what you're doing with Depp. It's going to ruin your credibility. It might make Johnny Depp look bad, as if I had power to make Johnny Depp look bad. But anyway, right? But you know what I'm saying. And I was not going to cover it, but there was something, I have to, not to be too dramatic, but there was something inside me that it was almost like a voice saying, you've got to talk about this. You've got to talk about this. Like a compulsion. I've to explain this before. Making these videos at times is a kind of a compulsion, like a lot of great art is. Not that my videos are great art. Ooh, scratch that. Someone's going to complain about that shit. I'm not saying my videos are great art. Motherfuckers. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But no, I don't mean that. I'm just saying, like, I think that anyone, even if they're like a shitty artist who makes art, who feels the need to make art, I think often it's a kind of a compulsion. So anyway, here's my point though, or make videos or whatever. Here's my point before I trip myself up earlier. Is that I think I've had this feeling since the beginning, not just with my intellect, not just with seeing the evidence and seeing the contradictions and the problems with the accusers and their stories and all that, but and all of this, but I really believe that there is a reckoning that is coming for his accusers, and I really believe that there is a kind of a societal and reputational reinstatement that will occur with Marilyn Manson. And is it going to be Evan Rachel Wood and Ilma Gore getting arrested? Is it going to be some of these people being legally eviscerated, metaphorically? Is it going to be Manson winning the lawsuit against Evan Rachel Wood and Ilma Gore? Is it going to be some of these other women losing their lawsuits in very public ways? Is it going to be the media catching on to the truth and reporting it? I don't know. I hope all of the above. But there is going to be a reckoning. And when people finally get their minds around what has happened here, I'm telling you, when people finally get their minds around what is happening here, I don't know if it's going to happen next week. Probably not. I don't know if it's going to happen next month. I don't know if it's going to happen next year. I don't know if it's going to take 5 years. But when the chickens come home to roost, and when people get their minds around and find out what has happened here, the biggest hoax in the history of the entertainment industry, I would say, and maybe the biggest Me Too hoax ever, or one of the biggest Me Too hoaxes. I mean, this is a gigantic hoax. Multiple women, a coordinated hit, very carefully planned out, media blitzes, lawsuits, documentaries. I mean, this Manson stuff is a whole other level. It is beyond Depp, and I don't say that to the Depp thing, and I don't say that to minimize what Depp has been through or going through. I'm just saying this thing is a whole other level, and when the shit finally hits the fan, or when people finally realize the truth of this, it is going to be not only a huge story, but it is going to have some historical significance. It is going to be seen as a kind of a sign of the times, or a kind of an indicator of various forces that have emerged in our modern culture, whether it's, we're talking about media, or we're talking about sensational journalism, or we're talking about Me Too, or we're talking, just all of it. And Marilyn Manson is going to be at the center of that. Once again, Marilyn Manson, who for decades has found a way to be, either intentionally or unintentionally, at the center of some of the biggest, not only the biggest controversies in society, but some of the biggest socio-political flashpoints and cultural flashpoints. He's going to be there again. He is here. He is in the middle of it. And right now, he is, he's in the wilderness. I've talked about the wilderness before. We all go through the wilderness. We all have to have our time in the wilderness. We all have to have our time in the barrel. And he's got his time. But I'm telling you, people are going to look back. This is going to give him a kind of cultural and historical relevance that he would not have had otherwise. And like Oscar Wilde, it will enhance his legacy, and I do think it will turn out to be a net gain. So that's what I think, and that's why I have hope, even during the bad weeks, even when we have to watch Evan Rachel Wood yapping everywhere on TV. So y'all have a great night. Subscribe to my channel, follow me on Instagram, hit me up in PayPal, Patreon, whatever, and I'll have more to come. Bye.